Okay, let's unpack this. Think about building the most intricate structure you can imagine, layer by layer, connection by connection, all happening in what you'd think is the most protected place possible.
Right, we're talking about the human brain developing before birth. It's just awe-inspiring.
But here's the thing, the key insight from the sources you've shared,
Yeah.
that environment, the womb, it isn't a completely sealed bubble, is it?
That's absolutely right. I mean, genetics gives you the blueprint, sure, but the actual construction, it's incredibly dynamic.
Uh-huh.
And what's truly fascinating, as these sources really underscore, is how much the world outside the womb can influence things, filtered, through the pregnant person's body and experiences.
Exactly. So today we're doing a deep dive into this material you've brought. We want to explore precisely that, how various environmental factors, things faced during pregnancy, can significantly impact the developing brain, fetus, neonate, that whole critical period.
Yeah, our mission here is to sift through this information, understand what these environmental stressors actually are, according to the research.
And how they might be working, like the mechanism.
Exactly, how they might disrupt development at, well, a really fundamental level. And crucially, why this connection matters for, long-term health.
Okay. And we're using some key resources here. We've got this comprehensive review article, 2024, from the journal Antioxidants. That gives us the big picture, right?
Right, a broad overview.
Yeah.
And then we're going to zoom in a bit. There's an earlier paper, 2016, J Neuroscience.
Ah, the specific mechanism one.
That's the one. It really dissects a particular, pretty fascinating link between inflammation and a key neurochemical signal, serotonin.
Interesting. Okay, so where do we start? The timeline seems crucial.
Definitely. Let's anchor ourselves there. Brain development isn't something that just kicks off at birth. It starts incredibly early.
How early?
We're talking around the second to third week of gestation, almost immediately after conception.
Wow. That early. It's already building the foundation then.
Precisely. And it continues at this breathtaking pace all through pregnancy and well into childhood. Key milestones, like cells migrating to form brain structures, massive neuron creation.
Neurogenesis.
That's it, neurogenesis. It happens really rapidly in specific windows, especially concentrated between, say, the 8th and 18th weeks of gestation.
So it's a period of intense, really time-sensitive activity.
Absolutely. And this whole complex process, it's influenced by like a three-way interaction. You've got the genetic instruction,
It's a blueprint.
the blueprint, yeah. Then epigenetic modifications, that's how genes get expressed differently based on the environment without changing the DNA code itself.
All right, turning genes up or down.
Kind of like that, yeah.
Yeah.
And then direct environmental factors acting on the developing tissues.
And the sources put a huge emphasis on the intrauterine environment, don't they? The conditions inside the womb. Why is that specific environment so critical?
Well, because its influence goes way beyond just immediate fetal growth. The conditions in utero can actually set the stage through those epigenetic changes and other mechanisms for risks of chronic diseases much later in life.
Like programming future health, almost.
In a way, yes. Affecting organ function, overall health trajectory, it's profound. Now, across all the different stressors the sources mention, do they point to any common threads? Like how they're having these effects?
Yeah, they're common denominators.
They definitely do. One of the key themes that keeps popping up is the role of inflammation and oxidative stress.
Okay, oxidative stress.
Oh, yeah.
That's the imbalance, right?
Yeah.
Free radicals and antioxidants.
Exactly, an imbalance. The sources suggest that various environmental insults, different kinds of stressors, can trigger maternal inflammation or ramp up oxidative stress. And these seem to be common pathways for disrupting fetal brain development. They can also mess with the supply of nutrients getting to the fetus.
Okay, so inflammation, oxidative stress, nutrient supply. Those are our recurring suspects. Let's map out the specific types of stressors the sources identify. What categories are we looking at?
The main review breaks it down into several key areas. First up, and maybe obviously, nutrition. It plays an absolutely fundamental role.
Makes sense. You need the right building materials.
You really do. And it's not just about getting enough. Both insufficient nutrition and unhealthy dietary patterns during pregnancy can significantly harm development.
So deficiencies matter.
Definitely. The sources mention specific micronutrient deficiencies, things like DHA, folate, iodine being linked to adverse effects. But it's also about excess.
Like too much fat or sugar?
Yeah, excessive intake of macronutrients is also associated with problems. They specifically call out the Western diet.
Right, I saw that. High in the big stuff, low in the micro stuff.
Pretty much. High macro, low micro. It's flagged as particularly problematic in studies. They also mention animal models like low-protein diets in mice linked to developmental delays.
And positive examples.
Yeah, they contrast it with diets like the Mediterranean diet, which seem to be associated with more positive neurodevelopmental outcomes. So it's clearly about the quality and balance, not just the amount.
Okay, so food isn't just fuel, it's sending signals affecting brain building. What about maternal health and lifestyle? That's another big one.
Huge. Changes in the pregnant person's gut bacteria, their microbiota during pregnancy, linked to worse behavioral outcomes in offspring.
How does that work?
The potential pathway seems to involve inflammation again and something called metabolic endotoxemia. Basically, stuff from gut bacteria gets into the bloodstream, causing system-wide inflammation.
Wow, and obesity, high-fat diets.
Also strongly implicated. Both animal studies and human epidemiological studies suggest links between maternal obesity or high-fat diets and things like cognitive challenges, ADHD, autism spectrum conditions, even psychoses in the offspring.
That's a wide range of potential impacts. What of psychological well-being? Stress, mood?
Absolutely critical. Maternal depression, anxiety, significant stress,
Yeah.
they're linked to disturbed fetal neurodevelopment. Potential changes in brain structure and function, we see this across human and animal models. And of course, the well-documented ones. Smoking and alcohol. Significant risks there, increasing the likelihood of ADHD, autism, schizophrenia, general behavioral issues. No surprise, but important to state.
So physical health, mental state, lifestyle choices, all feeding into that internal environment. What about external exposures? Things from the wider world?
Air pollution comes up significantly in the sources, exposure to fine particulate matter, polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, stuff like that.
And the link?
Linked to neurodevelopmental disorders. And the suggested mechanisms. You guessed it.
Let me guess. Oxidative stress and inflammation.
Bingo. In the developing brain, it really is a recurring theme.
It certainly seems to be. Finally, the sources also touch on socioeconomic factors.
Yes. Disadvantaged socioeconomic conditions are consistently linked to adverse pregnancy outcomes and also poorer neurodevelopmental outcomes in children.
How do they fit into the mechanism picture?
The sources frame these conditions as significant external stimuli that can impact development, often working through those same pathways we keep mentioning. Inflammation, altered nutrient supply.
That really paints a picture of how broad the influences are, doesn't it? From the very personal, like diet, to the societal level. Okay, let's dig a bit deeper into the mechanisms. How might these diverse stressors actually cause disruptions?
Right. It's not just vague harm. They interfere with fundamental biological processes. The sources point to certain pathological pregnancy conditions as really clear examples where you can see these mechanisms at work.
You mean like fetal growth restriction?
FGR.
And preterm birth, PTB?
Exactly those. FGR and PTB are strongly associated with neurodevelopmental issues later on. FGR, where the fetus isn't growing as expected, is often down to problems with the placenta. Leading to chronic low oxygen, hypoxia, and undernutrition for the fetus. Even if the body tries to protect the brain with brain sparing, prioritizing blood flow there, development is still impacted. It's a clear case of that altered fetal nutrient supply mechanism.
Okay. And preterm birth, PTB?
Being born too early, PTB, is often linked to maternal inflammation or infection. Prematurity itself is a huge challenge. It disrupts the normal timing, the normal processes of axons growing, neurons migrating. It can lead to brain abnormalities.
So that's a prime example of the intrauterine inflammation mechanism causing trouble.
Precisely. So these conditions, FGR and PTB, they aren't just outcomes. They are the mechanisms, or at least clear manifestations of them, disrupting development.
Got it.
And the sources elaborate on those common pathways. We mentioned altered fetal nutrient supply, like in FGR. Then there's intrauterine inflammation. This is a key consequence of so many stressors: obesity, stress, pollutants.
And it's not just general inflammation.
No, it directly influences critical signaling pathways inside the fetal brain, things involving insulin, neurotransmitters.
The communication lines between brain cells.
Yes, exactly that.
Yeah.
It impacts synaptic plasticity, the brain's ability to form and change connections, and neurotrophic factors, which are like essential grow and survive signals for brain cells. The sources explain that when the maternal immune system gets activated by these stressors, it contributes to mitochondrial dysfunction problems with the cell's energy factories and oxidative stress in the fetus. It creates this kind of harmful feedback loop.
A self-perpetuating cycle of damage.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Disrupting the whole orderly process of brain development, it makes for a really challenging environment for those developing brain cells.
Definitely. Any other mechanisms mentioned?
One more key one is a compromised blood-brain barrier. This is normally a super protective layer, shielding the brain.
Keeping bad stuff out.
Right. But chemicals, inflammatory conditions, they can damage this barrier. That lets potentially harmful molecules leak into the delicate brain environment, causing even more impairment.
Okay, so the picture emerging is a wide range of external factors trigger inflammation, oxidative stress, maybe nutrient issues, and these then interfere with core brain processes like cell signaling, growth, protection. Now, this is where it gets really interesting, right? That second source, the 2016 J Neuroscience paper, it gives a powerful, specific example of how inflammation can act molecularly.
Yes. This study is just a fantastic illustration. It shows how these seemingly broad insults can have very precise effects.
Yeah.
And it focuses on the placenta, surprisingly.
The placenta, I mean, I think of it delivering oxygen, nutrients.
Right, we often see it as passive, but this study highlights its active role in actually synthesizing serotonin, 5-HT, a crucial neurotransmitter.
The placenta makes serotonin. Wow, okay, I did not know that.
It's pretty remarkable. During typical development, the placenta takes tryptophan, an amino acid from the mother,
Uh-huh.
converts it into serotonin, and sends that serotonin to the fetal brain. And this external serotonin helps guide specific developmental processes there.
So it's not just a delivery truck, it's a chemical factory influencing brain wiring. Okay, so what did they do in the mouse study?
The researchers induced moderate maternal inflammation in mice. They did it during mid-pregnancy, which is a really critical window for brain development. Used a substance called poly-IC.
What does that do?
It mimics a viral infection, basically triggers an immune response.
Okay, so they induced inflammation. What was the key result?
This is the core finding. The inflammation caused a rapid, specific increase in the placenta's ability to turn tryptophan into serotonin. They actually measured transient increases in tryptophan availability in the placenta and in the activity of the key enzyme, TPH.
Tryptophan hydroxylase.
Right, TPH.
Mhm.
The enzyme that does the conversion, its activity went up.
So inflammation effectively cranked up the placenta's serotonin production line. What did that extra placenta-made serotonin do to the fetal brain?
This is where it gets fascinating. It led to an accumulation of this external placental serotonin, specifically in the fetal forebrain. But here's the critical bit. It's kind of counterintuitive. Instead of just boosting the brain serotonin system, this flood of serotonin from the placenta actually blunted or inhibited the growth of the brain's own serotonin pathways, the endogenous axons in that specific area.
Wait, so too much serotonin, or maybe serotonin from the wrong place at the wrong time?
Exactly. It wasn't just more is better. It was serotonin arriving perhaps at the wrong developmental moment, or from this external source, disrupting the brain's own carefully timed wiring process.
That's complex. So the brain's own system got suppressed because of the signal from the inflamed placenta. Wild. Did they prove the enzyme was the cause?
Yes, that was a crucial control experiment. They used a blocker to inhibit that TPH enzyme in the placenta.
But even with inflammation.
Even with inflammation present, if they blocked that serotonin production step in the placenta, those negative effects on the fetal brain's serotonin pathways, they were prevented.
Wow.
It strongly supported their conclusion. The altered placental serotonin production, triggered by inflammation, was directly causing the disruption in the fetal forebrain.
That's a really elegant demonstration of a specific molecular mechanism. What's the bigger picture significance of that study then?
Well, it's highly significant because it established this new specific molecular pathway, altered placental tryptophan to serotonin conversion. It showed how maternal inflammation can mess with the serotonin system during development.
It highlights the placenta's role.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Solidifies the placenta's active, sensitive role. And it gives us valuable insights, into how early environmental insults like inflammation could contribute to the developmental origins of conditions potentially linked to serotonin issues later in life.
Yeah.
Mental health conditions, perhaps?
Okay, we've covered the landscape of stressors, the general mechanisms like inflammation and nutrients, and zoomed into this really specific serotonin pathway via the placenta. So what does this all mean? If we pull all these threads together from the sources, what's the big takeaway for us?
Synthesizing it all, yeah, I think we see a clear and pretty powerful picture. A whole wide array of environmental factors experienced during pregnancy.
Diet, health, stress, pollution, socioeconomic factors.
Exactly, all of it. They can profoundly impact how the fetal brain develops. And these influences often seem to converge on common disruptive pathways. Primarily, it looks like inflammation and changes in the supply of crucial nutrients and signals.
And that placenta serotonin example really gives us a glimpse into the incredible molecular detail how an insult translates into specific changes in brain architecture.
It does. It takes it from a broad concept, like inflammation is bad, to a specific biological event. And for you, the listener, understanding these links is, well, I think it's vital. It highlights just how much the environment before birth is actively shaping the foundational structure of the brain,
Laying the groundwork.
laying the groundwork for long-term health, for neurodevelopmental outcomes across the entire lifespan. It really emphasizes the interconnectedness.
It really does.
And the main review article really hammers this point home. Given these clear links, identifying and addressing these modifiable risk factors, it's not just academic.
It's crucial for public health.
Crucial for improving individual health, public health outcomes globally. Now, the sources don't necessarily detail all the specific interventions, but they make a very strong case for their importance based on this evidence.
And it sounds like there's still a lot more to learn here.
Oh, absolutely. The review definitely points to the need for more research, especially rigorous longitudinal studies.
I'm following people over time.
Yeah, tracking exposures and outcomes over many years. That's how we can really understand these complex interactions and confirm the long-term consequences.
Well, this deep dive has been incredibly illuminating. It just reveals how sensitive, how responsive the developing brain is to that very first environment.
It's a truly humbling area of science, isn't it?
So let's leave you with a final provocative thought, building on everything we've explored today. Ponder this profound idea. The earliest architecture of our brains, our most complex organ, is being shaped not just by our inherited genes, but by this constant conversation with the world outside the womb.
A conversation mediated through these fundamental biological pathways, inflammation, nutrient supply, even the delicate balance of chemicals like serotonin, produced by an organ like the placenta.
So what does this intricate, deep connection truly mean for how we think about supporting health right from the very beginning, for individuals and for society as a whole? Something to think about.